Welcome to The Long Haul, the podcast dedicated to empowering small carriers and owner-operators to drive their business forward. I'm your host, Adam Wingfield, bringing you insights from industry leaders, real-world success stories, and strategies to help you navigate the road to profitability. Whether you're just getting started or looking to take your fleet to the next level, this is a show where trucking meets opportunity. So buckle up, it's time to go the distance. Welcome back, everybody, to another exciting episode of The Long Haul. You know, as I always start off, I'm always excited, but this one is a little is a little more exciting, if I can say that. Today's guest has sat on both sides of the supply chain, from the CEO seat at a trucking company to his current role leading the charge for carriers inside of one of the biggest platforms in freight. He is the vice president of carrier experience at Truckstop, one of our good friends over there. He's not just your average tech executive. He's got over 17 years in transportation, and that includes his time at Fortune 500s and as the former CEO of Q Carriers. He brings a real-world mindset to the innovation conversation. So in today's episode, we dig into Truckstop's brand new 30th anniversary carrier survey, what it tells us about where the industry is headed, and how tools like private loads, authority filters, and AI-assisted features are shaping the next revolution of the load board. So this isn't just a hype reel. I really wanted to look at a grounded look at what works, what's next, and what Truckstop's doing to keep small carriers in the driver's seat of a digital freight future. So without further ado, welcome to The Long Haul, Mr. Todd Waldron. Welcome to the show.
Adam, thank you for having me, man. It's great to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller. So it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I've known you for some time now. So it's great
Yeah.
to be able to sit down and chat.
Yeah, man, it's crazy, man. We've known each other out of the space for some time. Finally got a time to kind of sit down and talk. I want to go back. I want to take everybody back a little bit, so we all know where the end goal is. We see the truck stop shirt. We know where you're at now. But for the listeners that are on here, I want to bring them up to speed on where you come from. Take us way, way back to the beginning years and what really got you in the freight to start with.
Absolutely. So I started my career at C.H. Robinson out of college. And so I had the opportunity between two roles. One was a management training program at a formal uniform company, a suit and tie management training program. And then I walked into C.H. Robinson to view that for the interview. And low cubicles, a lot of energy, footballs flying around,
Yeah.
and you could just see this team-based energy and atmosphere. And so even for lower pay, that's where I ended up and haven't left since. So that was my catapult in the industry, was brokering freight off the West Coast of the Northeast, produce freight. So learned a challenging commodity and a challenging lane, but built so many great relationships with so many wonderful carriers, and then progressed from there into a few different roles there, and then opened a brokerage branch for JB Hunt up in Minneapolis, Minnesota in about 2013. And so was there for 6 years total. And then 4 of them were down in Arkansas headquarters, where I got, just a lot of insight into asset-based transportation, the trucking, the intermodal side, but then was primarily in the brokerage side of the business, and worked heavily on the development of JB Hunt 360. So then got to apply, how is technology changing and evolving in transportation, and be a big part of that, which was a really cool opportunity. In 2019, got the opportunity to come back up. One of my good friends, dad, had started Q Carriers based in Minnesota, refrigerated trucking company that started in 1981. So been around for a while, and I got the amazing opportunity to lead that organization, and be a part of what we were doing in the evolution of transportation. And so was there for 5.5 years. We had about 115 trucks, refrigerated food and beverage, again, led that, and then we had a brokerage division there as well. And so fast forward 2024, and 2024, we had ended up selling the business from that standpoint, and then ended up at Truckstop, again working on technology and bringing together these passions. Like I've just loved being in logistics, transportation, understanding these very complex problems and issues, as well as how impactful and challenging it can be on people. Right. And so now being on the technology side and saying, how can we make technology that makes lives easier? One of my visions, as being at Q carriers and otherwise, was how do we create an enjoyable transportation experience, and for everybody that's involved. And the director of our shop, our maintenance shop at the time, was like, the drivers' trucks are broken down when they come to me. How is that going to be enjoyable? And I said, wait a minute. If you asked every one of these drivers when their truck's broken down, what shop do they want to bring it to? If they could pick it, they'll have one off the top of their head,
Yeah.
because they were treated fairly, they were billed accurately, they were treated with respect. And so it's not about comparing it to sipping pina coladas on the beach somewhere. It's saying, wait a minute, in this circumstance, how do we make this industry more enjoyable? And so that's my passion and vision. And it's come a long way, but we still have a lot of work to do. And how do we create this ecosystem that it works together and is focused on making each other's lives more enjoyable, rather than our own objectives and motivations that often just pollute our ability to see the other side of the perspective. And so that brings me here to today, and helps drive me in what I do, and try to make it better for everybody. So
One of the things that I always respected about you, Todd, was not. I mean, the C.H. Robinson stuff. Obviously that's great. That you got that experience on that side, and the J.B. Hunt stuff on a 360, which I think is great too. I really really kind of really latched on to admiration and what you do once you took the CEO helm of Q Carriers, though. Q Carrier, I mean, because it's different, man. When you operate assets on the small carrier side, man, it's different. It's very different because there's a lot that goes along with that enterprise side. You have large teams, you have large organizations that you can delegate through. The culture is one of the things that's defined over slow moving waves, but in a small carrier environment, things move a lot quicker in terms of culture implementation. But most importantly, you got the opportunity to see the operation side, and seeing the operation side on an asset based carrier is much different than being able to call the shots as a tech exec. So what I see is that most tech execs, and I won't say most, I'll say many, to be fair.
yeah.
Many tech execs haven't sat in the seat of a trucking operator. So my question for you is, what do you see differently because of your background that others in the same space may not see?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the things is often the complexity, the daily challenges, and then the human side, the nature side of it, right? And so this is, as we look at technology and what's happened with technology in transportation over the last 10 to 15 years, so many people have come in to try to replace humans and or a process and insert technology, and so many have fallen short, because what they fail to realize is the level of exceptions that take place in the daily life of truck drivers and employees and people. And so that's the big, I always say, exceptions overtake the rule in transportation, right? We try to look at this, and we can derive and see a process there. When you dig deeper, what really happens when a driver arrives at a delivery location and doesn't have a delivery number? It's not as simple as calling and finding and looking up in the TMS that delivery number. It's often that the number could have been transposed incorrectly, sent
Right,
improperly. It could
right.
have started when the product was ordered, from the original salesperson, that the number started coming downstream, in a changed or disrupted fashion. And so to just, one, see how many different things can impact a single interaction or single thing to make transportation run smoothly is one of the big things. And then two, to see how that impacts the people involved. When the driver doesn't have a delivery number, and they're ready, to see how that impacts their ability to get unloaded, their ability to then, guess what? They're trying to get home for a child's birthday or
Yeah.
something else, and that they have going on. And so to see that, and to be down in the driver's lounge on a daily basis and just talk to them, and hear the challenges back home and the things that have impacted them, and then to hear them talk about what an interaction at a shipper and receiver was, and how that actually impacted them. And so those are the two kind of like primary areas, I would say. that have really, I think, really differentiate someone who sat in multiple roles in transportation versus someone who hasn't. And they can see it, they can hear it, they can maybe empathize, but you don't truly understand until you've looked at and had to problem resolve an issue in transportation when someone's livelihood is dependent on it.
Mhm.
And so JB Hunt I'll give them a shout out, but they'd put out two wonderful videos back when I was there. That one was about a driver's story. Every driver has a story that was so impactful, and the other was like a journey of a shipment, and just seeing the complexity of it in a visualized. They're a bit longer videos, but they did a good job of capturing that. But yeah, those are probably the two main things that I probably point out. But
It's crazy, and we're going to talk a little bit about the survey because I thought the survey is really cool, and I don't know if they can cue this up right now, but I'm literally, and it's just so on par where we're going as far as the future. You talked about technology, and I'm literally on my screen looking at an Aurora truck going down the highway in like live format from inside the cab, and where I'm actually seeing it app move inside traffic and doing all this stuff. I mean, literally, we're watching it going up and down the highway. They've got this live stream that Aurora does, so it shows us how far, right, that technology has taken us. But one of the things that came up in your survey that I got to question you on, and I really want to have conversation about, because it said 60% of the carriers in your survey said they feel optimistic about where trucking is headed in the future. But when we talk to small carriers, and then you look on social media, you look on TikTok, you look on Reddit, you look on X, many feel that they're one rate cut away from trucking. They feel like the technology folks, and let's just say it, like the tech folks, like the big tech, it's like working together to try to move more towards what we're seeing in this autonomous place. What what's fueling that optimism that you found on you guys' side? And does it
Mhm.
really reflect the one truck, two truck, five truck experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like too, like from a social media standpoint, I feel like often a lot of the negative voices get brought to the surface more. So I always talk about the broker carrier relationship. And there's so many negative voices around how brokers are bad, or the relationship's bad. But getting and living in operations and seeing firsthand positive broker carrier relationships and solid relationships that are built, it's like you oftentimes get a different lens than you might through social media. One, two, I do feel like there's two sides of it. I think there
Hmm.
is still some concern and things that are concern. For me, where I think the 60% optimism that's kind of driving, highlights a couple things. One is that there's just confidence that trucking and transportation will always be here. There's rate challenges, certainly, level number of freight, and how I balance my network, and how do I might have a good head haul, but how do I get the back haul to get back home, and is that as readily available? And then also, what's the rate at, right? And so there's challenges to this. But there's also so many years that trucking and transportation has proven to correct itself and adapt in order to keep progressing forward. And so that's kind of what's happening at the micro cyclical environment. It's been a long down cycle, so there's some
Yeah.
unknowns there. Um, but at the macro level, there's so much positive conversations around driver experience and improving driver experience. The data around experience at shippers and receivers, and now brokers, and other folks advocating on behalf of drivers and carriers to shippers to say we have to improve this experience because there's data that shows it impacts your rate and it impacts the drivers that will haul your freight. And so technology has enabled a positive momentum in those conversations, whether it's dwell time, average dwell time at shippers and receivers, optimizing the freight
Hmm.
patterns and things like that. And so I think there's some optimism that spurs from that. The other is drivers starting to realize and see the value from the technology that is being inserted into transportation. If you go back, one of the primary drivers of tension was the tracking and tracing
Yeah.
of smartphone mechanisms, right?
Yeah.
And so there's one discomfort around being tracked, two unknowns around what's going to happen with my data and information. Are they
Mhm.
just seeing me on this load I'm hauling for them, or do they see every movement I make from now for the foreseeable future? And three, what are they going to do with that? Will they monetize my data and information and make money off of this piece of information that's stirring from me? And so I think as an industry, we've done a good job overall of working through those tensions and providing good levels and layers of security and understanding around that. A, but B, now that value that was once uh, focused on the shipper and focused on the broker is now saying, hey, there's value points that drivers and carriers are able to obtain from this intelligence that's actually going to improve my profitability. It's going to improve my communication with folks. It's going to improve my relationships, and bring me a positive impact. And so I think we're turning, have a critical turning point where we're starting to see things that are driver focused and carrier focused in that value delivery of the technology. So while there's certainly things to be concerned about, to continue advocating for, to continue talking about and improving, I think that those are some of the underlying optimistic points that people still hold on to and value in the industry.
You mentioned a good point a few minutes ago, and you were talking specifically about what we call app fatigue. And we all get it, right? Every
Yeah.
single broker you sign up with, they want a different app. You get a shipper, they want an app. You may have a TMS integration that's necessary. It may be that, hey, you know what? You've seen it. It's been all over the news. The data leaks on a couple of these apps that have went viral, and it's a trust piece when it comes down to it. But your data is saying that, based on your survey, is saying that tech adaptation is higher now than it's ever been before. But but I guess my question would be, what's the difference between good tech that really solves problems, and then you just got this kind of, I don't want to call it bad tech, but it's just redundant tech that just adds additional work. Like, what would you say was the difference between the two?
Yeah. That's how much time I got? That's a good question. So yeah, I just heard a great example on another podcast about this that I want to kind of speak into and dive into. But at a high level, to me, the difference is not only the knowledge of transportation and what's really taking place, but also an understanding of what's actually possible. Bad tech, to me, like you can categorize bad actors or bad technology or things that aren't even like feasible, and let's separate those. But well-intentioned technology companies that then in turn might become bad tech, to me, is due to not having enough granularity in the process, and
Mhm.
or a poor implementation driven by a poor SOP or data integrity. And so an example that I recently heard was talking about how like after hour support or having automated phone customer service, and that the technology is here to be able to do that. But from my standpoint, it's not as simple as just inserting this technology that might be feasible because of the complexity in what is actually occurring. Back to that example of that delivery appointment number. A driver calls in and doesn't have a delivery appointment number. A small percentage of the time, I'm guessing, is because they didn't see it on their system, or it just didn't make its way to
Sure.
them. The wider percentage of the time was that it wasn't entered correctly. It was fat fingered. It's in a different field in a TMS. There's pickup numbers, appointment numbers, delivery numbers, load numbers, SKU numbers, PO numbers. It's like
Yeah.
it gets put in the wrong field, and or it didn't come down from the confirmation. So if a driver calls in at in the middle of the night wanting to get a delivery number, and that bot doesn't know where to look, because then it's like you get the message if you're on the phone with them, if you had this, it's like, no, it starts,
Hmm.
the delivery number starts with a 7 and it's 6 digits. Okay, where do I go look for that? Can I go look at the confirmations? Can I go call, what shipper or receiver am I going to call? And what's the phone number that is the right number to call to get to the dock to get an answer quickest? And so for me, technology that might be good on the surface underestimates what's needed to bring this process up to par with what the current process is. And so then it falls short. I'll go back to what I said earlier. Exceptions overtake the rule. And so if it's not intelligent enough and or implemented at a deep enough level to understand that variability, now the experience becomes poor. We've all called into an automated um, um, line, or someone got an
Oh
automated
my
person, and
God.
I still have not had a good experience that said, okay, I feel like my issue is going to be taken care of. If I called and got someone, on the phone, and all I needed to hear was, I'm going to take care of it. They do all that stuff behind the scenes and then come back with the delivery number if it's a broker or a shipper that I can trust in that relationship. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing to me is we've seen so much technology that might be good on the surface, but underneath it is not properly, they're underestimating, or they haven't thought through the problem deep enough to be able to build the technology out enough, and or they don't have a deep enough implementation, an SOP process to make it whole. So I think that's kind of at the heart for me, where I would differentiate the two, and a lot try to do too much or try to take on too complex of issues and go from 0 to 60. Right.
And the crazy thing too is that you're there's a fine line between where perception is always reality, and I think that
Yep.
it takes a lot to sell me as a small carrier to say, okay, I'm gonna
Yep.
download this other app because Todd said so, or
Yep.
I need to see that ROI, and you kind of talked about the whole IVR situation, which I can tell you, I'm the person that as soon as I hear an IVR, I'm screaming customer service rep. I don't care what the number is,
Yeah.
and I'm hitting zero as fast as I can.
Yep.
So I think that it's going to
Absolutely.
take that adaptation, though. I mean, especially from a small carrier, because you're already giving me, 1,000 different numbers you want me to have, and now it's 11:30 at night. You expected me to talk to a bot, and the bot's not understanding me. I got a little background noise, and I think that, to your point, it's just a strange feeling. Now, part of your
Mhm.
survey too is some of that result was 50% of your carriers said that fraud prevention has improved, which that's a
Yep.
significant increase. What role is Truckstop playing in that fight, and what's still broken in the Truckstop system?
Yeah. Yeah. So with Truckstop's RMIS product is one, right? And the development and evolution we put into that, as fraud is definitely changed and adapted so much in the last couple of years. And so that's one foundational pillar. And then two, the prevention and things that we do in regards to who we allow onto the load board, that drastically reduces, and eliminates the amount of fraud that takes place on that. And so having 30 years in the industry and such a well built process and security team and database enables us to be able to have those checks and balances in place, that really help, minimize these opportunities. And so I think we've certainly come a long way, and we're continuing to develop and roll out new ways of not only monitoring information, but then how do we report on the information, and then how do we ensure that we're keeping up with what the fraudsters are doing. And so, yeah, it's been encouraging to see those survey results as well as very positive survey results and some other ones just around our load board and how low fraud instances really are from that case. And so, yeah, that's definitely been encouraging as the last 2 years have been tough. I ran a
Yeah.
brokerage in 2023, 2024, and it's like it was wild to see how quickly stuff was changing and the lengths people were taking to take advantage of people. So,
Things went downhill really, really quickly. One of the things I can
mhm.
appreciate most out of Truckstop and just watching, Truckstop, you guys have been around 30 years. And I remember having a conversation with a few of your executives a couple of years ago. And one of the things is that was shared was like, hey, we are good at tech. We are focusing on improving our footprint on being better at the industry needs. And one of the things that I have seen more out of your company than most tech companies within the space, whether it be load boards, whether it be onboarding platforms, one of the things that I think is most impressive is the most simplest thing in business that you could possibly have. And that's this right here is your ear, the listening ear. You guys, your social media team is always on point. I can tell you one of the things that, if Truckstop goes down, we're going to know about it on social media before it gets out to anybody else. Very, very transparent when it comes down to that. And so you got some feedback and you made a change that I think it's a game changer when it comes down to your platform. And it's the new authority age filter. Imagine as a carrier, you're brand new. You see the loads on the load board. You go start calling some of the loads on. You pick up the phone call. You call the first 10 of them, and they all say, "Yeah, I can't work with you. I can't use you because your authority is too new." Well, Truckstop heard that feedback, and now they've created a product that I'm going to let you kind of expound upon on. That instead of having to go through all of that noise and miss out on a potential opportunity, you put in a filter in there. So
Yeah.
was that developed based on user pain points or a broader fraud reduction strategy?
Yeah. A couple points, primarily user friction points and minimizing that user friction. And so before I get into that one, you were talking about the legacy of listening to our customers. And so in our most recent survey, it was 73% of respondents trust Truckstop as a brand. And one of the foundations comes from how we listen to carriers, brokers, our customers. And that's big as Scott Mosgrip steps back into the CEO seat. I've heard him mention that numerous times. That is at his ethos, which is listen to our customers who will tell us what we need to do. But the age authority filter is a great example of something that hey, this was a solid pain point. So I'm in the weekly review calls. We review them more frequently, which is all the feedback we're getting from various sources, whether social media, NPS surveys, or other feedback channels that we have. And we're reviewing all that feedback, capturing it, understanding it, and the product team's engaged, the sales team, myself, and others to say, what can we do to impact this? And so the age authority filter is one, thing that I think we'd continue to hear is that
Mm-hmm.
it's challenging to find brokers that will work with me. And so this is one simple step to look at and say, now brokers can enter how what the minimum authority that they will work with is, and then I as a carrier can filter on that, and so I can filter to see the loads from brokers that will work with my authority level, so that I'm not wasting time calling brokers and only hearing, oh, I'm sorry, we won't work with people of that authority, with that level or less than a year of authority or what have you. And so we're seeing great adoption. I think it's 33% more views on loads that have the authority requirements present, or hiring 33% higher engagement on those shipments. And so it's absolutely something that carriers are welcoming and wanting. And so that's to me one step. And then the next step for me is how do we legitimize new carriers coming in so that the minimum authority is there for a purpose, from a broker perspective, but there are legitimate carriers coming in. And so we're talking about and looking at ways to say, hey, how do we add some level of additional checks and balances to help the carriers that are of new authority to make sure that people know that they're legitimate, right? And not fraudsters trying to take advantage of the system. So I think this is one great step in that direction to make carriers more efficient, and connect with, and brokers more efficient for that matter too, and connect with the people that they're going to work well with and build meaningful relationships with.
Do you think that brokers, as a whole, are still doing enough to filter out risky partners, or are some still prioritizing speed over safety when it comes down to posting loads?
Great question. Um,
Told you we're
I,
going to
I
dig
think it
into it.
comes. Yeah, man. I think it comes in waves. That is such a hard one to paint with a broad brush or categorize. Like I would say I think brokers have done a lot and um, do a lot to
Mhm,
minimize and mitigate. And I think they have minimized the focus on speed and profit and raised the bar on quality and assurance. But I think the problem in transportation is that there's these competing priorities that always come in and start to affect our
mhm,
well-intentioned desires. Whether we're a carrier or a broker or a shipper, priorities, especially if the market starts to begin and shift or change, and I have to balance an upset angry shipper, or I have too many loads, or employees are working long hours because I don't have as many employees now because I've been running lean because the market's been so loose. And so now I'm have these two decisions in the moment that are more complex than we often talk about in the debate. Because the debate would say, and most people would say, well, yes, if you have great relationships, you call and talk to your shipper, and you say, I just don't have a qualified carrier I feel good enough about. That's the ideal, is that in that situation, you're going to be able to do that. The reality is, we're not always able to do that, A, and B, I might have some red flags, but not foundational information that tells me that
mhm.
this is in fact a bad carrier. And this is a spectrum. There's definitely fraudsters, but then there might be varying service levels or safety of drivers. And so um, I think, yes, they've made a lot of progress across the board. Have they done enough? Uh, I think that's hard to say, and it's going to change with the market. I think in
Yeah.
a down market, they've probably, yes, are doing a very good job about it. But when the market gets tighter and there's more pressure, I could see some of that, the checks and balances taking a back seat to the need to maintain customer service. So I think it's a great question. You can tell by the way I answered it that I dive
Yeah.
deep into the complexity of these questions. And like I always look at the question of, are carriers in a tight market? Are carriers putting their trucks in a spot market? In the loose market, are shippers putting their loads in the spot market? And I'm like, that's happening, but I think the reality is so much more complex than that. And we often give and talk in these or these generalities that give each other a bad name, and carriers versus brokers versus shippers. But the reality is there's a lot more happening behind the scenes, right? And so that, yeah, I don't know if that if that's a fair answer, but
Hey, you can't you spoke from the heart on it. That's all I can ask for.
yeah.
I think that too. I think, you guys got a new feature too that I think, as we kind of, kind of talk more about that, the broker side of things. Yeah, you got a feature called the private loads. And I think that feature is powerful. I think, especially for brokers trying to manage, a tighter carrier network, like you just talked about, when things get tight, what does that look like? And I think that that is great for brokers that are trying to manage that tight network in the event that they need to do that. And then it provides them with that ability to do so. But how does that impact small carriers who are not in those private networks yet? What does that create? Two separate marketplaces inside the platform unintentionally?
Well, I think that comes down to like what defines a private carrier. And so it's not necessarily even about size access, or it's driven today by being RMIS approved. And so those small carriers that have those tight relationships with brokers that they work with and are in an approved status will then have that ability to see those loads that are posted to the private network. So it almost enables them based off of relationships. So this is the key, Adam, where if we talk about doing the right things to keep fraud out of the industry, but the other is just the general procurement strategy of the broker changing to be focused on relationships and the people, whether it's an owner operator or 5 trucks operation or 10 truck operations, the folks that I work well with and want to work with, I would historically be sharing those loads via an email or a phone call to certain shipment
Sure.
before to certain carriers before I put them on the spot load board or a truck stop load board. And so this actually opens up and enables possibly more of those small carriers that I'm connected to that broker and I'm approved with that broker. Might not be their top relationship one, but now I might get visibility to those private loads to deepen that relationship with them. And so we see it as something that only helps progress from, hey, this is our first time meeting. This is our first load together. We got to build trust to now we're the next level up in that trust. I'm not published on your lane yet, but now I have the ability to get in your tighter knit of circle and talk to you about what that looks like. And so, yeah, I think in some circumstances there might be a risk of how you interact and who you interact with.
Sure.
But in reality, today you wouldn't have gotten visibility to those loads before, anyways, because it's not going to take from what's posted to the spot load. It's going to take from what was transacted in email to a certain
Yeah.
group or phone call and
Yeah.
put that into a wider platform based communication, basically.
That's pretty strategic, and I think that it'll also help reduce some of those manuals. It'll help reduce some of kind of that. Okay, I sent these emails out. Some of them were non-delivered. Some of them, went to spam. Which obviously, I think it'll help in speed to transaction when it comes down to it. I think it's also smart, in my opinion. Like, hey, are you unintentionally going to get two separate platforms? Looking at it from a small carrier perspective, probably. And I don't mean by a private network, like you said, like, hey, I got a private fleet of 500 trucks. It's not like that, but it's just the reality of it. It's like this is it's gonna there's gonna be two lanes. Obviously that even
Mhm.
unintentionally, I think that I think it's still good. I think it's good because it now that I got the private network, well, me as a private carrier, and I feel like I'm in a private network. It also gives me a little brush the shoulder off too, makes me feel a little bit better. So I think ultimately that helps elevate the culture.
Yeah. Well, and I think the nice thing is it's all in the same place too. So
Yeah.
it's a private tag on the load, so you can see all the spot loads versus private loads
Right.
within there. And so then you can quickly see. And the thing that's partnered with that well is the an onboarding feature to see who I'm already onboarded with. Another
Yeah.
time saving thing. So it's in essence a way of saying, wait a minute, I have some connection to this load. And so I can quickly see that and I have some deeper level of interaction than this is from who knows who, and so it almost moves up the research that they're doing, and so that would be their next layer of research is they expand the load to see is this
Yeah.
a broker I know or not, and so this actually provides it in the same place, and so yeah, I mean, watching the behaviors of brokers and carriers with this private load board feature
Yeah.
or load feature is going to be something we're going to continue to watch and look at to see how it evolves and how do we make sure that yeah it's providing necessary value to both parties.
The survey showed that too, also that carriers believe technology and not regulation is what shapes their day to day ultimately, right? What's your take on that? Should tech companies be more accountable in shaping how freight moves more than regulations? What's your thoughts at a small carrier level on that?
Yeah, yeah, I think there's certain areas where regulation um, needs to align and protect well, meaning small carriers, right? And so there's a certain cutoff of a point, whether it's safety related But often, yes, it's us and the ecosystem, right? Regulation can't answer all things. A, B, the challenge with regulations is that you try to insert them with good intent, but they often fall short of understanding the nuances of transportation and do more bad than good. And so with technology, but also all the players in the industry, I think there's definitely a responsibility to how do we work together to do the right things for the parties in this ecosystem and to support the small carriers and to enable them to be successful because we need them, right? I was just looking at the newest demographic survey by ATRI and some of the again continuation of age, average age of drivers rising. And so it's like, how do we as an industry help each other be successful? And
Sure.
so there's a lot that we can focus on as technology companies to enable that, because that means more success for the industry, right? And more successful what we do. So at Truckstop, a lot of our customer base is small carriers, and so that's a lot of my focus and being here as the carrier experience, but then also as the product and sales team is like, how do we make them and help them be successful when there's so many other challenges that they have to deal with for managing their business and their technology and their equipment. So
Some of this you may be able to share, some of it may not. But I look at, you guys have been teasing and dripping innovation and dripping new features and new things that you're looking at over the next year. If you look at Truckstop's next 12 to 18 months, for the listeners, the small carriers that no one operates out there, what innovation are you most excited about that small carriers should have on their radar that's coming from Truckstop?
yeah, I I'd tell you, yes, it's been, especially like we have a whole slew of things, and there's a lot of effort happening in releasing things, some big, some large, but then some incremental things, right?
Hmm.
That will impact how they can interact. So like the authority age filter, I mean, the private loads, those are some of the big ones that we put a lot of momentum behind launching. There's one, that we're in the process of building, that's a deep link direct through to a broker system if they have one. And so, well, not seemingly huge, it's things like that that will enable them, if it's better for them to transact through the directly to the broker's website and transact within that site, let's make it easier for them to get there. Less clicks, less copy and pasting. Let's deep link into there so they can transact that way. And so there's that. We're obviously talking about and having discussions around how does AI continue to evolve, and how does it enable and help the small carriers to operate, but also not hinder the small carriers as we look at what does it mean for the broker? What does it mean for the carrier? What does it mean for the load matching, of how we match and look at loads? And so yeah, I would say there's a lot coming. There's a lot of you'll see a lot of small things that we won't even talk about because we have so many things happening,
Sure.
that you'll see advancements, improvements in UI, and how I get through the system. And we're continue to be talking about how do we improve that. I've started a carrier advisory board, and so if there's interest there, definitely reach out to me. We want to build an advisory board of carriers that not only help speak into the product roadmap, but then get
Hmm.
feedback on products. Because like anybody, you're not always going to hit the mark the first time, but we react fast. And that's the thing that's been encouraging, being at Truckstop, is being close to the feedback and then reacting fast to it. Um, is definitely something that I think helps us do well. But yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, being in the industry for 30 years, there's a lot of folks coming in trying to disrupt the industry and talking about how they're the new, they're the future, etc. But
Yeah.
for me, it's the legacy providers that listen to the customers, that innovate, both in incremental as well as larger ways, and that work together. To me, this industry's always been about that. It's less about competition, more about, hey, there's room for multiple players in this space of transportation, and we want to work together to improve the industry and make it better. We don't want to focus on taking out another technology provider, or focus on what the competition's doing another way. It's solely focused on, wait, what's going to make the carriers, our customers, and potential customers' lives better and more efficient.
You talked about deep linking to a broker's website, and that sounds like pretty intuitive when it comes down to it. But what does it mean for platform royalty? I mean, loyalty. You think about being loyal to the platform, and that deep linking opportunity there. Will we see more fragmentation on how carriers book, or are you trying to centralize the digital handshake of sorts?
Yeah, I mean, it's enabling carriers and brokers to transact where they want to transact, right? And
Sure.
so some brokerages have a more built out procurement platform that has, for them, where some brokerages don't have as much built out procurement platform. And so the ones that have it, they might have a way that, or a way to capture the carrier or the bid, or acceptance information in their system, that it just enables another workflow that they're able to capture, right? And so it's an alternative to phone calls or emails, and just enabling a different way to communicate. So it's not as much about replacing or one taking over the other. It's about, hey, let's meet the carriers where they want to meet. Let's not try to monopolize the entire transaction and pigeonhole them into a certain way of doing it. Let's open it up to allow for transactions that are the most efficient for them, right?
Yeah.
And so that's what it is to me, and not so much as trying to pigeonhole them into a certain direction or things like that. It's still the option to pick up and call if it makes sense, or follow the broker's platform and get engaged with that. If you work with a customer more frequently and you engage in their platform regularly, then maybe it's a great avenue to get into that. So
That makes sense. If here's one for you. If you were still running a small carrier today, what three tools or filters would you be using every single day on Truckstop with the opportunity and the thought to just help move your business along?
yeah, absolutely. I would say one is absolutely the private loads feature, to
Hmm.
now, like I said, move what is happening in emails and phone calls into the same platform that we might see our spot loads in. And so that's a big one. And then the other is the load popularity, but then from a tooling standpoint, the rating intelligence and information, to be able to say and look at what is the rate that a broker might have posted compared to what's the market rate showing, and what does that mean for my business, would be the other. And then just the relationship building stuff, right? The onboarding and understanding with RMIS as a carrier, what brokers am I onboarded with, is a huge time saving filter. So I know that who I've already filled the packet out with, who I've already set up with, I know that I can work with in 5 minutes versus 10 to 15 or even 30. And so that those are the ones to me that are like the most time saving opportunities. That as a running a trucking company with 115 trucks, we had a fair amount of shipper direct freight, but we still had our brokerages that we worked with. And
Yeah.
so now I'm in the Truckstop platform, rather than our fleet planners are going to be more in an email and emailing their key brokers and saying, do you have any freight? Do you have any loads? And so now those teams are operating more in the Truckstop platform and getting more value from it, and operating and trying to keep their trucks running.
There's a, and this is as we wrap up today. Obviously, this has been an incredible discussion just to kind of see it from the truck stop intention side. A lot of times I think that's really important for the carrier to see, like, hey, we're building these tools that based on like practical experience. We're also building these based on, hey, you know what? We want to carry advisory because we want to help you help us shape up the tools that you're going to be using every day. So when you think about all of the talk in a space, and you know that talk doesn't always align and lead to progress, sometimes it just runs around into a circle. What's one thing that Truckstop is doing differently right now that you believe will tangibly help small carriers build more sustainable, more profitable businesses in 25, 26, beyond, just from what you guys are putting together?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the biggest thing I would just hinder on is listening, like you said,
Yeah,
listening and reacting is like the foundationally one. More practically, what I would say is not trying to disrupt completely, right? Like we're talking about what the future might look like, but we're also focused on the incremental value,
yeah,
improving the workflow, improving the efficiency. And it's not saying, hey, we want to try to come out with this incredibly new thing and completely disrupt transportation or things like that. No, it's focused on wait, what is making their lives more efficient? So whether it's talking about and finding ways to get more shipments on the platform, to better provide recommendations that are more in tune with your business, where you're running, what your needs are. So focusing on how do we get more intelligent recommendations and not noisy recommendations that you see with some providers or some things out there, so that it's actually giving me meaningful information.
right.
The rating intelligence is another thing that just helps me be more profitable as we're talking about. So we're talking about all of those. How do we bring all of that together and then keep giving tools to drivers and to carriers that helps them step out from just trying to find a shipment to let's step back and how are they interacting with other providers and how can we make that more efficient, but how are they planning and running their routes in their network and how can we make that more efficient? And so yeah, that's kind of how I'd sum that up in a nutshell. But that's definitely our focus is not only today but in 25 years, and what's the incremental path to get there, and not try to just leap to 25 years and say, oh, we have this new, totally new AI
Yeah.
oriented thing that's going to do all your work for you and solve all your headaches. And it's like, no, that's not how transportation innovation works. It's focused on getting there, but it's constantly adapting, incrementing, and growing together and listening. So
That's innovation and that's forward thinking. And, again, I wanted to really just to take the moment and appreciate what Truck Stop's doing. There's always the opportunity to kind of move forward in your own direction. But you guys have recently just said, nah, we're going to listen to the carrier. So big thanks to Todd for coming through and just giving us the kind of insight that we usually don't get straight, from the source when it comes down to that. So thank you again for joining us on the episode today. Today, you heard a lot. You heard everything from what Truck Stop's doing, what Truck Stop's intending on doing, some of the things that you're seeing across the industry as a whole. And I really appreciate the just transparency. To really appreciate the fact that you guys may not get everything right, but the things that you're not getting right, you want to like, hey, come on, let's talk about it. We want to build a carrier council around that. So thank you for doing that. For everybody, I want to if they needed to get in contact with somebody about joining that carrier council with Truckstop, how would they do so?
yeah, you can email me directly, Todd Waldron at truckstop.com. No dots in between, just Todd Waldron at truckstop.com. I'm on LinkedIn. We have, a LinkedIn company page, Facebook company page, and the person who runs the social media has direct access to get you the link to sign up to that as well. So any of those ways, you can go check out truckstop.com as well and send us a note and we can get you set up and signed up to be reviewed to join that. So,
Man, big
yep.
thanks and shout out to you again, Todd. Thank you so much for joining our episode today. And for the listeners on this call, make sure that you obviously want to go and hit the Truck Stop team up in regards to that. I encourage anyone to get onto this platform to go through and get your voice heard. Join that carrier council in doing so. And again, thank you for the insight. Obviously, that we don't get it straight from the source, and coming directly from you is definitely appreciated. So, for everybody that was listening today, make sure you share, like, and subscribe this episode. For those that were interested in the Carrier Council, and those who just like what Truckstop's doing, make sure that you support the movement and what they're doing. Todd, once again, thank you again for joining us on the episode today. It was a pleasure having you. It's rare that you find someone who's been on the operational carrier side and then now going to the tech side and just sharing that type of information. So I really appreciate that. And thank you again for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Adam. It was a pleasure. Appreciate it.
All right. And everybody that had the opportunity to check out today's episode, I need you to make sure that you're being safe. Make sure you focus on positivity, and most importantly, be profitable. I'll see you on the next episode. Have a good one.